Ted Stank, you and your colleagues from the University of Tennessee wrote a great opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal this week about the bullwhip effect. Can you share a little bit more about, what the bullwhip effect was and what motivated you to write that article?
So to me, the bullwhip effect is defined as one little ripple starts building. If I am the entity in the supply chain closest to the consumer, I start seeing changes in demand, whether it's up or down, and I react to that. And I'm going to build in some safety into that because, there's variation. I can't predict it directly. And so I send that demand queue up to my supplier. And my supplier seeing that not only from me, but other customers they have in the same vertical, right? And they're saying, wow, something's going on here. We better build excess capacity in case we have that, that uncertainty that ripples, right? And then they pass it up to their suppliers. And as we get further and further from the point of consumption, that small potential uncertainty has multiplied many times over, so that as we get way up the supply chain, that the demand queue is wildly biased. And what that causes then is a situation where demand might spike for a certain period of time. And because of the time lags in the supply chain, by the time all that inventory gets pushed downstream to meet what was potentially a demand spike, the demand can have gone and done many different things. But the time lag in our supply chains are such that now we have this excess inventory. And it works both ways, in my opinion. It works when demand drops off as well. And then the demand queue is, hey, cut back on capacity. And so we can't respond. And very much like anybody that grew up in the North and went ice skating as a kid, and we get, 10 people in a line holding hands and one person stops and that whip just goes crazy. And if you're at the end of the whip, that variation accentuates and the person at the end of the whip goes flying off into a snowbank. Yeah.
So you get this issue, the factor of safety gets amplified in the form of both inventory, safety stock, and larger cycle stock order quantities, and also in terms of building out manufacturing capacity and storage capacity. So what you expect to see when you've got the bullwhip effect is it feels like there's a big increase in demand. And so you're trying to order in inventory and build manufacturing capacity, and you're working overtime. And then essentially overnight that disappears. And then you're left with excess inventory and excess capacity, and that has financial consequences. I would argue we tend to talk about it as changes in demand. But I think it could also be a disruption in supply.
No, right? I totally agree with you.
Right? Yeah. Which we don't talk about as often, but, blockage in the Suez Canal, blizzard in Texas, now shut down a port in China because of COVID.
Yeah.
All of those things can trigger bullwhips. The other thing is that the behavior side, and this is something that we get from playing the beer game, is it's not because somebody is doing something wrong. Right? It's the design of the system. This is a behavior of the system with everybody making what seem like rational decisions in the moment have this kind of emergent compounding effect.
And particularly because of the way that we parse out information. Despite all that we've talked about with digital technology, nobody really has the entire picture, right? So we all have little pieces of the picture. And again, if you think about the beer game and what happens when that information gets distorted as it gets passed along. Yeah.
Exactly. So, a big part of it is the disconnects in information, and that's the reality of supply chains. Mm-hmm. So the one other thing that we often find when you're at this part of the bullwhip, right, where you're it seems like demand is far outstripping capacity and inventory, is then you start, folks that have capacity, folks that have inventory start allocating to their customers.
Yeah.
Right? But their customers are only getting a part, if you order 10 and your supplier says, all right, I'll give you one, well, then what do? You order 100. right? And so
Right.
you end up with this phantom demand,
Right.
which amplifies the bullwhip even further.
And that's the behaviors that you were just talking about, right? I mean, because I'm going to protect my organization. And if we need 10 and I know I'm only going to get 10% of what I order, then right, I'm going to order 100.